Aloha. I'm joined by Chad Blair, the politics editor for Civil Beat. Chad, you just finished up with the historical legislative session. Tell us about it.
That's the word that a lot of people are using, and I don't think it's a stretch. There were so many things that happened, and I'll just name three or four that right are at the very top. First of all, to get an income tax break is very unusual. In Hawaii, we're pretty heavily taxed, but they managed to have enough money where particularly the lower and middle income earners will get money back. So will the higher income earners. They passed another bill that has been proposed time and time again, usually by the minority Republicans, to eliminate the general excise tax on medical services, Medicaid, Medicare, TRICARE. This is something that has been really pushed from the rural communities where it's difficult to service people out there. Amazing that they did that as well. Then the two other big bills, and we could name any number of them, have to do pretty much with housing. One of them allows people to put additional units, ADUs we call them, right? Accessory dwelling units on their property. This is something that's freaking out some communities that don't want to see more development, but the counter argument is, hey, we have the land. Why shouldn't we be able to rent out a place and make some income? This is not necessarily Airbnb or anything like that, which actually leads to the other big accomplishment. And this is allowing the counties to have authority, zoning authority, over short-term rentals. And the goal, ultimately, for many of the mayors will be to actually phase them out. And Mayor Richard Bisson of Maui County, even before Josh Green, the governor, signed the bill, went ahead and moved with the council to phase out some 7,000 STRs, as they are called. This has become so glaringly, obviously, a very serious problem because of the Lahaina fires and the displacement of people and the need for affordable housing.
Right. So, staying with Maui and with Lahaina, one of the big things that needed to be solved for was what's going to be the fate of Hawaiian Electric. What happened there?
That fate is not decided yet, and I don't know that we're going to know for some time. Perhaps the most controversial bill was Senate Bill 2922, the Hawaiian Electric Company securitization bill. And I won't go into too much detail other than it would allow HECO, which is really the only utility in the state, with the exception of Kauai, which has its own co-op, to float bonds, to raise revenue, to deal with wildfire mitigation down the road, but it would also entail raising rates for utility owners, people that use electricity, which is everybody, and a 5% increase, as a matter of fact. Well, Jared Keohokalole, the Senate Chair of Commerce and Consumer Protection, to many people's surprise, killed that bill in the very last few days of session. And it came as a big shock, certainly to Governor Green, who's been supporting this, as well as many of the senator's colleagues. Where that is right now, I mean, why did they do it? It looked like a bailout. I mean, here we are we're paying the most expensive electricity rates in the country. And now you want us to help out a monopoly, which does have a lot of people that, I mean, they have shareholders. Their executives make a lot of money, well over six figures. And so I just don't think it was palatable given that it is an election season this year. Where it is now, though, is the governor, with the help of the legislature, is going to consider what to do. One possibility is to have a special session, bring lawmakers back in, try and fix the eco bill. I don't think that's going to be very palatable to many people. Plus, they're running for re-election. But we'll see how it goes, because ultimately what's at play here is the status of our very long-standing, deeply connected Hawaiian Electric, even with ownership elsewhere. There's a lot of people that it employs. There's a lot of union workers as well. Should it file for bankruptcy, a lot of people have warned that that would not be a good thing for the state. Having said that, there are others that are saying, go ahead. It happened in California. Too bad. But we'll see. It's a very big deal. It was a big shock at the end of session.
Yeah. Earlier, we had been talking about many of the different pieces of legislation that we were going to be keeping an eye on, and one of our earlier talks was about marijuana. What happened there?
I called that one right. I will say that marijuana legislation, the recreational bill, which would allow use for people 21 years and older, as well as expanding the decriminalization. You can have up to 3 grams with a small penalty. The police really don't enforce it. They were going to raise that amount higher. But both of those bills died, even though they made it further along than they have in any session. I guessed, and guessed correctly, that it just wasn't going to happen. There's a very conservative element in this state, and the police, the prosecutors, many in law enforcement, but not the defenders, public defenders, were against it. And the warnings were along the lines of reefer madness, that somehow, I mean, I agree, marijuana is a lot stronger than when you and I were kids, but it's also medical marijuana. I mean, you don't hear people saying, let's ban medical alcohol
Right.
or medical nicotine. This also comes as the Biden administration is looking to finally move marijuana from a Schedule 1 category with heroin and LSD at the federal level down to a Schedule 3. This has been something that's been pushed for a very long time, and you see other states moving ahead. I think 24 states now have legalized or decrim or recreationalized, and I think something like 38 states have medical marijuana. It'll come up again, but I was not the least bit surprised. Having someone like former Governor Linda Lingle actually go down and testify it probably made a difference. Steve Alm, the Honolulu prosecutor, running for re-election, no doubt felt that as well. But at least it moved further along, but it just kind of makes you wonder. Think about the branding opportunities. Think about the agricultural opportunities, but that'll have to wait for another day.
Right. Well, Chad, before we were always talking about how many days are left until the end of session. How many days are left until the start of the next session? 200 something, right?
One of the things that was brought up by a number of lawmakers at the end of session is, even though it's a part-time session, they only meet from mid-January to early May, generally speaking. In fact, many of them work throughout the year, and they will be working, they call it the interim. There's a lot of stuff left to be done. First things first, they got to get reelected. And where that includes me, I'll be involved as well. The next thing that comes up is what the governor is going to veto. He has to indicate by late June what he'll sign into law, what he hasn't already signed into law, and whether he'll veto. He has to let the legislature know so they can then decide to come back and override him. So it never really ends. Lucky
Well,
me.
exactly. Well, we're lucky to have you covering the legislature for Civil Beat. We really enjoyed your coverage this year and look forward to next year.
Thanks, Naka.
Thank you.